Well, it is now 12 o'clock in Geneva, and I think we can start the meeting. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Geneva, the seat of the ATT Secretariat. To reintroduce myself, my name is Dumisani Dladla. I am the head of the ATT Secretariat and the secretary for this ATT meeting. We are on day 3 of our planned ATT meetings for the week. For today, we have 2 sessions planned. The first 2 hours will be dedicated to discussions on Article 11 of the treaty. The last hour of today's session will be focusing on deliberations and discussions on matters related to transparency and reporting. The first session will be facilitated by Ms. Stella Petrovic from Serbia, and the last hour of today on transparency and reporting will be facilitated by the co-chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting, Mr. Alejandro Alba of Mexico, as well as Ms. Yulia Fladescu of Romania. I must say at the very beginning that all the facilitators for today's sessions will be doing their work remotely. They would not be with me here, but they will be operating from their different geographic locations. But before I proceed to the first part of our today's meeting, I would like to remind delegates of the housekeeping rules that are applicable for our meeting today and tomorrow and the other day. We would like to take this opportunity and remind delegates that you should please keep your camera as well as your microphone off for the duration of the proceedings. We are making this call particularly to some of the delegates who are using or connecting using the mobile phones. They tend to accidentally turn on their devices. But if that does happen, we would unmute the affected delegate, or we'll mute him, my apologies, we'll mute the affected delegate. Secondly, we have a list of speakers, and I think we are now aware of the process of requesting to be on the speakers list. So the list is published on the website, and we have received requests until 1800 hours yesterday. When the time for discussion comes, the facilitators would read out the name of 3 speakers in a row so that they can be able to ready themselves to speak when their time comes. But of course, then when you are given a chance to take the platform, you are to unmute yourself and be in a position then to speak and turn on your camera. If you are not on the speakers list that was published this morning, which is on the website, you can still request for the floor. But you can do so by sending a message via the chat function and request for the floor. And whilst we are requesting for the floor via the chat function, you will indicate the state or the organization that you want to speak on behalf of. When the list of speakers is exhausted, the published one is exhausted, then we would extend to those speakers who have requested to speak using the chat function. But in instances where a speaker is given a platform to speak but is unable to connect in a timely manner, or there are issues of sound, we will proceed to the next speaker and come back to the speaker affected later. We would request delegates to keep their statements brief so that everyone can have a chance. And would request that the chat function that is currently operational, it should not be used to address everyone for any other purpose other than talking to the Secretariat. You can use the chat function to speak privately to a person that you want to speak to, but it makes the management of the chat function easy if it's properly focused. And finally, we have interpretation that is available, and I think you're quite familiar now with the procedure, that you go to the interpretation button, click on that and choose the language that you want to use. And of course, then if you do not do that, you'll always receive statements as well as presentations in the language in which they are delivered. This concludes the housekeeping rules for today's session. And I would now wish to proceed to the sub-working group on Article 11. And I understand that Ms. Stella Petrovich can hear me and can see me and is ready to go. So without any further waste of time, I will cross over then to Stella, who will be facilitating this session from Serbia, Belgrade to be specific, to continue. Stella, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies and colleagues. I'm very pleased that CSP7 preparatory meetings is taking place despite this current global situation, and that virtual format of the meeting did not affect live discussion and constructive dialogue of all stakeholders. This format is for sure a challenge for all of us. And in that sense, I would like to thank the Secretariat and to participants regarding the great work done so far during the previous 2 days. I'm very glad that I have opportunity to facilitate today's session on sub-working group on Article 11. Which is dedicated to one of the most important parts of Arms Trade Treaty, diversion. The ATT recognized diversion as one of the greatest threats for international security, who may lead to armed violence and cause human rights violations, followed by instability and insecurity regionally or globally. Having in mind the importance of diversion prevention, ATT established the highest possible international standards in order to secure controlled arms transfer and to ensure transparency and responsibility of the arms trade factors around the globe. Since the sub-working group was established, a lot of work has already been done. The multi-year work plan was created as a live document in order to shape discussion in 3 parts of transfer chain: before, during, and after the transfer. Having in mind that diversion may occur anytime and at any place, all 3 parts create a complete process and needs to be considered all together, especially that most actions during the arm transfer overlaps. In this concrete situation, we have to consider all actors in transfer chain very carefully, and apart from the states as the main actors, we have to consider importance of the role of the private sector and civil society in this process. As I already mentioned, all stages of transfer chains are divided into smaller areas, each with own questionnaires and discussions guidelines. The first 2 meetings during the CSP5 cycle considered the first item on the multi-year work plan on the issue of import documentation. The meeting on sub-working group held in February last year focused on chain stage number 1 before the transfer, namely assessing the risk of diversion and the role of private sector in mitigating diversion risks. Having in mind that we postponed last meeting for this session and importance to continue discussion, I prepared a draft paper outlining the elements of a process for assessing the risk of diversion based on discussion that took place during the meeting in February. The paper was distributed to all stakeholders in advance, and I will highlight the main elements that have arisen from discussion as important risk assessment tools whose improvement and promotion should be worked on further. Firstly, I would like to stress importance of end-user certificates in preventing and addressing diversion, noting that these documents should not be the only factor to rely on, having in mind different problems, especially authentication challenges, complications and long duration of authentication via diplomatic channels, fake certificates, lack of relevant information, etc. The possibility of sharing EUC templates through the ATT information exchange platform on a voluntary basis was highlighted as something to be explored, and states are encouraged to share EUC templates via ATT exchange platform. The importance of international cooperation on information sharing was emphasized, and voluntary exchange of information on illicit arms flows and diversion was also encouraged. Information sharing through other databases could be very helpful, and this source of information for risk assessment can be of great importance. Having in mind that, we have to mention the challenge that some information resources are not available for all states. For example, the Wassenaar Agreement denial database is not available to participating states who are not participating states in Wassenaar Agreement. Resources may vary case by case, and all credible and relevant information sources should be considered through risk assessment. For example, diplomatic, open sources, expertise, etc. Raising awareness in countries with a weak export control is another challenge. Keeping a national register of companies that can deal with arms export, who can apply for the export licenses once they are registered. Another challenge is providing expert trainings for those countries. Then we have to mention private sector, which is an important link in the transfer. Industry outreach programs may raise awareness on responsibility and diversion prevention, encouraging industry to report irregularities. Internal compliance programs, ICPs, are important in the private sector's role in mitigating risk diversions. And at the end, I would like to stress our last findings from the paper that civil society and NGOs play an important role in preventing diversion. They are usually the first in the field and very often the first to obtain the information. Accordingly, work should be done to improve information exchange between the civil society and states in order to ensure better transparency. Special importance should be placed on NGOs tracing databases, which can be reliable sources of information. This paper will be the first topic during our today's discussion, and later on we may continue to explore the practicalities and continue the session from the last February. I would like to stress the following elements for our today's discussion. We should emphasize how to undertake consistent and objective transfer risk assessment, taking into account the risk of diversion. Then, how to identify certain diversion risk indicators, how to establish legitimacy and credibility of all partners involved in transfer, such as exporters, brokers, shipping agents, freight forwarders, intermediate consignees, and state end users. Then, how to examine the risks arising from the proposed shipment arrangements, how to assess the reliability to control of importing country and country, and how to examine the risk of conventional arms transfer would increase the risk of diversion of the existing holdings of the end user. Then we should discuss what are the options for mitigating already detected risk. Also, we should discuss importance of private sector and civil society in mitigation of diversion risks. So we have, I think, at this moment, less than 2 hours for discussion. I already have prepared the list of speakers who wish to participate to debate, and I'm also encouraging other parties and organizations to participate to our today's debate, to use the chat function and to ask for a floor. Then I think we can proceed to dialogue, and I would like to give the floor first to Mexico, followed by the Switzerland. Thank you.
Stella, I propose that we proceed to take Switzerland whilst we're waiting for Mexico to get themselves organized. Switzerland, please.
Gracias. Creo que ahora sí me escuchan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you're listening to me. Thank you for facilitator. Our delegation would like to recognize the advancement in this group and the progress for the measures to fight diversion before, during, and after transfers. We think it's important that the group includes in its debates the study of practical cases of diversion to help us to understand better how to prevent this problem. This group should strengthen an approach based on public policies for prevention of diversion, considering that the new Forum of Information on Diversion will address this question through cooperation and international cooperation and study case by case. We really appreciate the work of Madame Stella to create a process of risk assessment of diversion. We think it's necessary to deepen the exchange of experiences, considering national experiences, and elaborate on measures to avoid diversion when a receiver state redistributes arms to other states or actors. Now, Mexico will keep on working on this issue, preparing for the next conference of the states parties, and thanks Serbia for all the work done in this area.
Thank you very much for your comment. And we are now proceeding to delegation of Switzerland. followed by delegation of United Kingdom. Sorry for this inconvenience, but sometimes we cannot unmute myself. I cannot unmute myself at the moment. I have to wait for approval, so maybe we have some lapses of time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Facilitator. You hear me? Okay. Let me first of all express Switzerland's gratitude for your much appreciated work in light of the unfavorable circumstances related to COVID-19 pandemic. Switzerland agrees with the key elements of a process for assessing the risk of diversion as outlined in your paper, draft paper. Among these key elements, Switzerland considers end-user certificates and the information exchange as the most important elements to assess the risk of diversion. However, one other important element is, in our opinion, missing in the draft paper, that is import documentation. If an export of arms is destined for a private recipient, an end-user certificate could, of course, be requested from the state of destination. However, in our view, it does not make much sense, as the state that signed the document and with it certain guarantees is not the end user of the arms. In such a case, Switzerland examines if valid import documents from the country of residence of the private recipient are available. In order to be sure that the end user certificates and import documents are authentic, it is necessary to verify them. In this regard, information exchange is of utmost importance. As already mentioned during the last meeting of the working group, Switzerland involves foreign embassies in Switzerland and Swiss embassies in the country of destination to verify end-user certificates or import documents. Additionally, Switzerland uses the ATT points of contact to get directly in touch with the relevant authority. In this regard, we would suggest to all states to use the ATT points of contact for such verifications more frequently. In the long run, and in order to facilitate the verification, it could make sense to explore if such document could receive standardized electronic signatures. In order to facilitate and promote the verification process, it would be desirable to have a list in the framework of the ATT, which shows the responsible authorities to issue import documents and end-user certificates. Although these aforementioned elements are of central importance to the effective implementation of the treaty, it must be pointed out that these measures are part of the overall risk assessment to which all state parties have committed to. Therefore, we call upon all states parties to conduct a risk assessment with respect to every single transfer on a case-by-case basis as required by the ATT. Thank you, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you, Switzerland. It was very useful to hear your views, and we will consider it as soon as it's possible. Now I'm giving the floor to United Kingdom. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for giving me the floor. The UK would like to thank the Chair for circulating the working paper which informs our discussions today. In particular, we welcome the focus on robust risk assessment as part of the export licensing process. A well-regulated legal trade in conventional arms will contribute to reducing diversion. The Arms Trade Treaty requires states parties to consider the risk of diversion in export assessment. It is essential that this requirement is met rigorously and that all key stakeholders are engaged to ensure a comprehensive assessment. Industry has an important role to play. Its input into ATT conversations could add real value given its involvement in export processes. Industry engagement can help amplify our messaging around the importance of good practice. An example of such fruitful engagement is the UK government-published Compliance Code of Practice, which was drawn up in close consultation with industry and provides guidance to exporters on how to ensure they are compliant with UK export controls. The UK applies a thorough risk assessment framework in considering export applications. We draw on a range of sources in making assessments, including NGOs and international organizations, diplomatic posts and reports from our overseas network. We continue to monitor developments closely, seeking further information where appropriate. We consider the information gathered in the round rather than placing over-reliance on any one piece, for example, end-use documentation. It is important to stress that no one piece of paper can prevent diversion, but a thorough evaluation of the risks can allow a properly reasoned decision. International cooperation is crucial to the detection and prevention of diversion. The UK therefore welcomes the decision of CSP6 to establish the Diversion Information Exchange Forum. However, for this forum to realise its potential, it is crucial that participants engage meaningfully. To do this, states, parties and signatories must have the confidence that the forum gives them a suitably confidential platform for frank, transparent discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, United Kingdom. Now I will give the floor to the Belgium, and after Belgium, I'm giving the floor to Nonviolence International Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Stella. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you very well.
Allow me to first congratulate you and also thank you for resuming your role as facilitator. We are very happy that we can move on with the multi-year work plan. And as the chair of the new Diversion Information Exchange Forum, we follow your work closely. As to the paper that is proposed to be adopted by CSP7, we are a bit unclear about the scope and the intention. The elements in the paper are not necessarily all practical elements that states could consider including in their diversion risk assessment processes. They do highlight a number of relevant topics, most of which would benefit from further discussion. In that sense, we actually have the question whether this paper is meant as a basis for further discussion in the CSP8 cycle on some kind of guidance document that would then complement the two existing living documents that were welcomed at CSP4. I refer there to the document with possible measures to prevent and address diversion, and to the list of possible reference documents to be considered by states parties to prevent and address diversion. In its current form, we don't think that it is desirable to present this paper as a key elements document to CSP7 to be adopted. And in that sense, also wanted to remark that the documents that I just mentioned were not adopted by the conference at CSP4. They were noted. Sorry, I lost my track there. Now, on the content of the paper, we also have a few substantive comments. As to the first element, we just want to point out that this topic is explicitly dealt with in the existing possible measures document. Then we already welcome, so maybe that could be a reference to that. As to the second element, obviously as chair of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum, we have to note that the relevant information sharing that is mentioned is obviously at the heart of the forum. and it was created as a subsidiary body specifically for such exchanges between states. We'll come back to that tomorrow, I think. And we also note that as part of that, we also have the restricted information exchange problem, allowing states to share information that could also be relevant in diversion risk assessments. As to the third element, well, we think that outreach and awareness raising is obviously important. In this particular context, I think we should more focus on the practical guidance about diversion risk assessment processes itself, which could then be an outreach tool in itself. To the fourth element, we very much agree that companies involved in arms transfers are both our partners and responsible parties in preventing and addressing diversion. Good compliance procedures and relevant information sharing with the authorities to allow a correct risk assessment and follow-up are part of that, so of those procedures that I mentioned. This applies not only to exporters, but also to importing companies and companies involved in transit and brokering. As to the fifth element, lastly, we agree that civil society can provide useful information for a diversion risk assessment. And in that regard, adding relevant websites and databases, such as the one of conflict armament research, to the list of possible reference documents might be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. This paper was created like a summary of previous discussions taking place here in during the ATT meetings, and the document for adoption of CSP7 will be distributed during the following period to all stakeholders. Now I'm giving the floor to Nonviolence International Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Facilitator. Nonviolence International Southeast Asia appreciates and fully welcomes the draft paper that you have prepared for this meeting. We fully agree that the elements outlined in the paper are indeed crucial to the risk assessment process to prevent diversion, and the comments that I will deliver here are in the context of what we have seen in our work in Southeast and South Asia. Information sharing and exchange among states are indeed critical to the process. Authentication challenges can be mitigated by bilateral verification between national points of contact, diplomatic missions, customs agencies, or through all these possible channels. Though some states may not have access to wider existing databases, such as the Wassenaar Arrangement denial database, they should be encouraged to keep centralized or at the very least readily accessible national records of their own that they can cross-reference with other states as the need arises. Some states, especially within the Southeast and South Asian regions, will require assistance in building and maintaining this centralized database. Engagement within regional organizations such as ASEAN in Southeast Asia can provide another layer of verification. We stress the importance of direct communications between state authorities, especially among trading partners. Ministerial meetings within regional organizations not only serve as a platform for dialogue, but also a means to build confidence among member states. Nonviolence International Southeast Asia reaffirms its commitment to support regional processes and to strengthen cooperation between the UN and ASEAN in maintaining international peace and security. In connection with this, we echo the draft paper's emphasis on the need to conduct risk assessment at every opportunity instead of relying on blanket judgments. Each state's export control structure varies, especially in Southeast Asia and South Asia. Law enforcement and defense ministries may grant the license, but others may involve trade and home ministries or even the executive's office to review license applications, while customs either directly or indirectly facilitates transfer through its own officials or accredited brokers. Some countries in Asia have a dedicated export control office that may still require arms licenses to be issued by law enforcement or defense ministries, while others do not. Regardless of the structure, clear and all-encompassing criteria must be the basis of all assessments, and this must be the very basic standard. Lastly, we completely agree with the sub-working group's findings regarding cross-sectoral partnership among government, civil society, and the private sector. In our experience, civil society has indeed been an important agenda setter insofar as the humanitarian consequences of illicit transfers are concerned, but we have also found that some countries' industries are very willing to establish safeguards against diversion. So engagement between these three pillars should be encouraged greatly. I thank you very much, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you very much, Ms. Savage. Now we are proceeding with the rest of delegation who would like to take the floor during our first topic discussion. Now the floor, I'm giving the floor to Republic of Korea, and after Korea, we will have a France. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I would like to start by expressing gratitude to the facilitator for preparing key elements of a process for assessing the risk of diversion based on the previous discussion. In particular, the Republic of Korea agrees that identifying the authentication of end-user certificates is very important in order to assess and prevent diversion risk. Therefore, it would be very helpful if state parties share their end-user certificate templates, the main contents to be filled, as well as information on the issuing organizations on the ATT information exchange platform. Sharing those information within the limit of confidentiality on a voluntary basis will help authentication of end-user certificates by state parties and contribute to mitigating diversion risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Now the floor will take delegation of France. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Facilitator, and my thanks for having submitted a draft document, which we find quite suitable. Madam Facilitator, to take into account a risk of misuse implies the determination of all special risks throughout the life of the weapons. For the prevention of diversion, 11.1 of the treaty indicates more specifically that state parties must evaluate the risk of diversion of exported weapons. That several measures can be adopted to evaluate, in line with Article 11 of the treaty, the risk of diversion associated to an operation of export of weapons. France would like to insist on 3 of these measures, which we think are vital. First, during the process of a request for export licensing, exporting states should be encouraged to require the indication of specific information, enabling them to evaluate the risk of diversion associated to the export operation considered. This risk depends on the type of arms exported, the factors of vulnerability which are associated, and for the final user, as well as the various parties to this transfer. Secondly, states should also be encouraged to undertake an interministerial or inter-department of export requests. This examination make it possible to analyze the risk of diversion based on reliable information from various sources and that are aligned. Thirdly, states should be encouraged to keep up-to-date databases, national databases that have a census of the physical entities which are involved in illicit trafficking. These three evaluation measures could also be associated to other measures which we call attenuation of risk taken at the time of the granting of export licenses. States can thus submit these authorizations to certain conditions, which would make it possible to prevent the risk of diversion. This could be the sending of justifying documents to be assured of the legality of the transfer, international import certificate, for example, or commitments as to the final user, which needs to be duly authenticated and monitored, restrictions in terms of re-exporting, and specific conditions in stockpiling or marking of the arms exported. This, Madam Moderator, is how my country sees the situation. Thank you very much, and I wish you full success in your future work.
Thank you. Now the floor, I'm giving the floor to delegation of Libya.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. The state of Libya would like to emphasize the importance to deal with diversion, the illicit diversion of weapons, and all regions of conflict attract weapons illegally, and this increases the acuteness of those problems and leads to violation of human rights. And therefore, since the state of Libya has been greatly impacted and negatively by certain countries because of these violations and the diversions of weapons in favor of parties that are very far from the legitimate government. And therefore, we are hopeful that more measures should be taken that would put an end to the diversion of weapons illegally to Libya. And we are also hopeful that we can shed some light and guarantee that diverting weapons illegally and far from coordination with the governmental authorities in the country will lead to more problems, especially in Africa. We also have to have countries that produce such weapons or are responsible for the diversion of weapons. These countries have to be responsible or held responsible regarding any violations or negative impact resulting from such operations. Thank you.
Thank to the Libyan mission to this intervention, and now I'm giving floor to delegation of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Nigeria delegation extends its warm regards to the co-chair of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting. We also appreciate your excellent work in coordinating the affairs of the Working Group. Nigeria signed and ratified the ATT Treaty in August 2013 as a mark of our sincere commitment and endorsement of ATT as a multilateral treaty which seeks to regulate the international trade in small arms and light weapons. Nigeria submitted its initial reports in December 2015, but we are yet to submit any annual reports since the due date of 31st May 2016. The non-submission of annual report has been traced to poor understanding of the treaty and capacity gaps among relevant stakeholders, especially their respective roles in meeting the reporting obligation. Madam Co-Chair, as you are aware, Article 16, subsection 3 of the ATT provides for the establishment of a voluntary trust fund to support national implementation of the treaty. In our own effort to strengthen capacity towards meeting our obligations to the treaty, Nigeria submitted a proposal titled Strengthening Interagency Cooperation for Treaty Implementation and Reporting under the 2020 VTF cycle. Following all the due process and subsequent approval of the project by the VTF Selection Committee, I'm pleased to inform you that Nigeria signed a grant agreement with the ATT Secretariat on 9th March 2021. The project is to run from 11 January to 31st October 2021, and the first tranche of the project sum has been received on March 24, 2021. As a result, activities toward the implementation of the project have since commenced in line with the agreed work schedule. At the moment, a needs assessment is being conducted and a report is being finalized by the consultant. Similarly, the project implementation partner has already researched, contacted, and interviewed some foreign-based consultants, as well as signed agreement with two that will develop the relevant training manuals. The needs assessment report on completion will be presented to the foreign consultant for development of the manual. In line with the schedule, the training manuals will be finalized on or before the end of May 2021. Permit me to also report that preliminary preparations, arrangements for the national training workshop to be organized in June 2021 for the relevant stakeholders are also ongoing. Madam Co-Chair, we strongly believe that the implementation of this project will not only enhance Nigerian capacity to meet treaty implementation and reporting obligations in terms of timely submissions of accurate, verifiable, and up-to-date annual reports, but also help in deepening the interagency cooperation with regard to the country's overall responsibility as far as the ATT is concerned. We therefore assure that Nigeria is on course and fully committed to ensure the successful implementation of the VTF-funded project. Lastly, Madam Co-Chair, we see this opportunity to express our appreciation to the United States and the VTF Selection Committee for this grant intervention. We also thank the ATT Secretariat for the administrative support to ensure effective implementation of this project. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador, for sharing all this information with us. Now we will have Finland, and after Finland, delegation of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Facilitator. Since I take the floor first time, I would like to express my thanks to Secretariat for organizing this meeting. I would also like to thank you, Facilitator, for preparing the key elements paper on diversion that is now under consideration. I align myself to the EU statement that was made earlier in this working group and make some comments on my national capacity. The Arms Trade Treaty has two main goals. The first one is to improve the regulation of the international trade of arms, and the second is to prevent illicit trade and diversion of conventional arms. These two dimensions are interdependent. Fight against illicit diversion of arms is a cross-cutting issue that concerns all actors, as you mentioned in your element paper, exporters, importers, and transit countries. It is therefore particularly relevant to foster exchange between them. But of course, we also need to include civil society and private sector to our exchange. Private sector manufacturers have their responsibility on eliminating diversion I think the Belgium delegation took this up also. I mean, the role of private sector in that statement. We hope that the issue will remain on our agenda also in the future. Diversion of weapons can be observed at different phases of transfer chain before, during, and after the transfer. These all are equally important. National export control deals mainly with the first phase, what happens before the export of a weapon. When the item leaves the territory, it is outside our national control. This is why we have a very careful case-by-case consideration where we take into account the potential risk of diversion in the assessment process, risk of violations of human rights and humanitarian law is always seriously considered. We base our decision on documentation, including end-user certificates. It would be good to further explore in this group what are the elements that the end-use certificate should include. Maybe I can mention here that we have had this type of discussion also among the EU member states about the elements of end-use certificates, voluntary elements, and mandatory elements. So this type of discussion, we are ready to continue here. The other issue is in-site inspection, where we can exchange good practices in the context of the ATT. Voluntary information sharing on cases and destination is very useful and can serve as a basis of national risk assessments. Informing sharing may take place on different levels, multilateral, regional, but also bilaterally. National contact points network could facilitate bilateral exchange. This is why it is important to strengthen the network of national contact points. Verification of documentation, if needed, was also mentioned here today by Swiss delegation. I think this is very. I mean, we are really willing to support this type of development among the national focal points. I would like to stress that national export control deals with the legal export of weapons. We try to minimize the risk that the exported items will become illegal later. However, this is just one side of the coin. In order to tackle illegal transfer and tracing the origins of weapons, we need to look at the root causes, such as sources of illicit supply, corruption, international trafficking routes, etc. On these issues, we already have a knowledge base, thanks, for example, to research institutions. Since I have the floor, let me also use this opportunity to thank the presidency and express my support to the draft working paper on strengthening efforts to eradicate the illicit trade in small arms, light weapons, and ensure effective stockpile management. Safety of stockpile management is an important factor that we have not much discussed in the context of the Arms Trade Treaty. It is important that we further explore synergies between the ATT and other programs and instruments in this field. Regional organizations also have an important role in fostering stockpile management. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Finland. I think now, if there is no one who would like to speak regarding the topic number 1, we should move to topic number 2. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding the first topic?
Madam Facilitator, we have we have Canada. We have requested
Canada. Okay, it is my mistake. Sorry. Thank you.
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Petrovic. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Canada wants to recognize and thanks the facilitator of the sub-working group on Article 11, Mrs. Stella Petrovic of Serbia, for her work and efforts in the elaboration of the draft paper outlining the elements of a process for assessing the risk of diversion. Canada has a particular interest in exploring how states parties can tackle diversion through concrete actions. For this reason, we believe that the presented draft paper will help open a fruitful discussion among state parties and other ATT stakeholders on concrete measures that can and are being taken already to mitigate the risk of diversion. We hope these discussions can help guide state parties in the implementation of their key commitments in this regard. We agree on the importance of end-user certificates in preventing and addressing diversion and encourages the possibility of sharing EUC templates through the ATT information exchange platform on a voluntary basis. In addition, we would be interested in exploring expanding discussions around other relevant documents that could increase reliability and address diversion in specific cases, such as the delivery verification certificate, help verify that the authorized end user has received the items covered by the export license. Canada acknowledges the importance of international cooperation on information sharing, especially among state parties. We believe that having clear communication channels can reinforce the cooperation in support of the treaty objectives. In addition, as part of important international cooperation measures to be implemented, we believe that confidence building, such as jointly developed and agreed programs by the importing and exporting states, should be considered in the draft paper. This could be an opportunity for states to learn more about best practices and examples of regional and bilateral cooperation. Furthermore, we are interested in discussions on diversion risk indicators that states are already implementing or will be willing to consider implementing as part of their risk assessment processes. Canada encourages including a non-prescriptive list of potential diversion risk indicators in the draft paper as another key element. Moreover, and we would like to take this opportunity to express our particular interest in promoting an increase in discussions on post-delivery verification measures that importing and exporting states can implement through close cooperation, given the increasing interest that this topic has generated among several ATT stakeholders. In this regard, we have conducted an informal consultation with several state parties in order to gather information that will ultimately serve to develop a working paper on post-delivery verification measures. This working paper on post-delivery verification measures will aim to gather different national perspectives in the ATT context and be as participatory as it can. The paper will be neutral in presenting its findings, and its purpose will be to stimulate discussion rather to champion a particular view. We would like to invite all the state parties interested in providing their views to reach out to Canadian delegation in order to receive a questionnaire that we have drafted to gather informal initial informations on post-delivery verification measures. The working paper will not identify the views of specific states, but rather provide an overview of general views and will benefit from the largest sample size possible. Our intention is to introduce the working paper at the CSP7. Thank you very much, Ms. Facilitator. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Ms. Gallardo, for informing us regarding your paper. I think it will be very interesting for the future debate, and other states and organizations may contact directly ATT Secretariat for more information, or directly your delegation. As we do not have more speakers regarding the topic 1. We are going to proceed to discussion from the topic 2. We are going to continue to explore assessing the risks of diversion that we already started last February. As I already have a list of speakers, a list of delegations who would like to speak. The first delegation is Finland, and after that is France. In case that Finland already used their opportunity to speak regarding the topic 1, we will proceed directly to the Republic of France.
Thank you very much. We already spoke, so thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm giving the floor to delegation of the Republic of France. Thank you.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Madame la
Thank you very much, Madam Facilitator. Like Finland, we had already expressed our views under item 1 and covered both the points. Thank you very much. I have nothing to add.
Thank you. Now we are proceeding to our discussion to delegation of Japan. Japan has the floor, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Japan would like to begin by expressing our gratitude to you and your team for preparing and organizing these important sessions. Japan attaches great importance to preventing the diversion of conventional arms. Since diversion can occur at any stages throughout the arms transfer chain, it is critical to take extensive measures to prevent and address these issues. At the CSP4, Japan chose diversion as a topic for thematic discussions during our presidency. And since then, we are pleased to see how active discussion has further progressed and continued to date among all stakeholders. Despite the unprecedented challenges during the CSP6, where all the decisions were made in a written format, state parties were able to agree on the establishment of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum last year. Japan expects that this new mechanism will provide a platform to promote constructive exchanges in a good faith among state parties and signatory states to address diversion issues in a concrete manner. I'd like to introduce our regional and national efforts to promote security export control. At the regional level, Japan has held the Asian Export Control Seminar in Tokyo as an annual event since 1993, targeting persons in charge of the export controls in Asian countries and regions. In 2020, we held the 27th seminar where over 200 participants from 33 countries and regions attended to discuss measures for further enhancement of the export controls and update the progress in each domestic systems. At the national level, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan has been actively engaging in outreach activities to support private sectors in establishing the security export control system through sending advisors and holding briefing sessions to raise awareness and strengthen the effectiveness of their systems. We believe that such activities at both the regional and national level will contribute to the efforts on reducing diversion risk. Japan will continue to work with all stakeholders to address the issue of diversion and to reduce the diversion risk of conventional arms through the enhancement of the national export control systems. Thank you, Mr. Facilitator.
Thank you, Ms. Nagai. Thank you. Now the floor have Switzerland and Canada after Switzerland. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. In line with the ATT's requirement in Article 11, Paragraph 2, and in accordance with the Swiss legislation, an export licensing officer undertakes a pre-transfer risk assessment on an individual case-by-case basis with respect to the criteria stipulated in Switzerland's ordinance on war materials. One of the criteria that is that an export needs to be denied if there is a high risk that the exported war material will be passed on to another end recipient than the one declared in the export request. In order to determine if that is the case, additional government agencies are involved in the process. For instance, amongst others, the Swiss embassy in the country of destination, the Peace and Human Rights Division of the Foreign Affairs Department, or in some cases, even our Federal Intelligence Service. These agencies share the necessary information about the country of destination in general, or the specific end user of the war material in question. The sources of the information vary. For instance, facts are gathered from past export cases, personal experience, the bilateral or multilateral exchange with other governments, human rights reports, and other reports from international organizations or NGOs, online tools like CARS, iTrace, the media, etc. As each case is assessed on an individual case-by-case basis, there is no one-way solution to assess the risk of diversion. Each case is different, and therefore the qualitative and quantitative efforts put into the risk assessment vary. That said, the case-by-case analysis allows us to react rapidly to changing circumstances. Based on our experience, the exports of arms via a third country might be seen as a red flag or respectively as a diversion risk indicator. Therefore, such export requests require more attention and a more thorough risk assessment. In order to prevent diversion, import documents, as already mentioned before, BAS and end-user certificates play an important role. If the end user is a governmental agency, Switzerland requests a written agreement to post-shipment verifications and the commitment not to re-export without prior permission in the end user certificate. In addition, Switzerland also conducts national company audits in order to examine the legitimacy and credibility of Swiss arms exporters. The starting point for these audits is the initial license that every arms exporter in Switzerland is legally required to have in order to deal with arms. Without such an initial license, arms exporters cannot request specific export licenses. Every application for this initial licensing is consulted with our Federal Intelligence Service to examine if the arms exporters offers the required guarantee for the proper conduct of their business and to check if the intended activity is not contrary to the national interest of Switzerland. After an arms exporter has received its initial license, the Export Control Authority of Switzerland also regularly carries out audits of the arms exporter. These audits are useful in order to find out whether the issues regarding the export control are understood by the arms exporter and if the exports are carried out correctly and in accordance with the corresponding licenses and legislation. Thank you, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you, Nicholas, for sharing some parts of your practice. And now we are proceeding to delegation of Canada, followed by a delegation of Ireland. I think we cannot hear Madam from Canada. I think we have some technical issues because we cannot hear delegation of Canada at the moment.
Madam Facilitator.
Yes.
I propose that we proceed, we get to the next speaker, then we can come back to Canada.
Okay, then we are proceeding to delegation of Ireland.
Good morning, madam. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, I can hear you very well.
Perfect.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the floor, Madam Facilitator. I would like to align Ireland with the statement made by the EU earlier this week and offer the following remarks in a national capacity. First, allow me to thank you for your very able chairmanship of this sub-working group and the preparation of the key elements paper distributed and the guidance questions for discussion. We are pleased that the multi-year work plan has been adopted and we are able to discuss these topics and have an exchange on these important matters. We noted with interest the Mexican proposal in the first session on the inclusion of general guidance examples on diversion and making the documents for Article 11 subgroup more practical in its implementation. Chair, in light of our limited time for discussion, I will keep my comments brief. First, on the guiding questions and the issues highlighted in the elements paper, I would like to draw the attention of colleagues to a recent research paper prepared by the Stimson Centre, supported by Ireland, on diversion and the Arms Trade Treaty, identifying good practice and opportunities for progress. As highlighted in the preparatory documents, a lack of a shared understanding of key terminology, diversion risk indicators, and key mitigation options are key issues we must address to help combat illicit arms transfers. The paper by Stimson offers a concise and practical overview of the different typologies and diversion risks as they exist in the arms supply chain. It further acts as a practical tool for us as policymakers, identifying key policy measures and examples to prevent and mitigate the risk of diversion. A guidance questionnaire on diversion in the annex of the paper can be used by licensing officers and our colleagues when carrying out diversion risk assessments. It is our hope that this paper can be of help to colleagues when assessing diversion risks and raise awareness of these issues. Though these issues can be daunting, small changes such as building a common understanding of diversion risks and implementing simple risk checklists on exports can have significant positive implications. Second, Ireland would like to support the efforts to further aid and facilitate greater information sharing and exchange within the ATT and the establishment of the Diversion Information Exchange Forum. As a small state, we are aware of the enormous benefits which come from having access to a wider pool of information when conducting risk assessments, and are all too aware that many states do not have the same resources available to them. Addressing this information asymmetry between states can vastly improve our collective efforts to combat diversion. We would note that civil society organizations play a particularly crucial role in this regard, as they are often the first ones in the field to identify diverted weapons, tracing diversion, and notifying exporters, and I commend them for their work. Their continued engagement in information exchange is vital to the successful implementation of Article 11 and the ATT. Lastly, as raised by my colleague during Monday's discussion on the President's thematic paper, the relationship between Article 11 and the gender dimension must be considered, as last year's report of the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights clearly demonstrates. Strong links between diversion and GBV. I will not repeat our points here in full, but I would like to underscore that we wish to see this aspect of Article 11 discussed in further subgroup meetings. I'm very happy to hear the exchanges of other states, and I look forward to continuing to work in this very dynamic and interesting working group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ireland. Now we have, I'm giving the floor to Control Arms, please.
Gracias por concederme la palabra, señora facilitadora.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Madam Facilitator. Control Arms welcomes the paper outlining the key elements of a process for assessing the risk of diversion as a helpful summary of the discussion during the meeting of the Article 11 subgroup on working group on 5th February 2020. As this sub-working group continues its work on assessing the risk of diversion, it's important to bear in mind the work already undertaken in this area and the measures developed within the document, possible measures to prevent and address diversion, contained in Annex D of the WGETI Chair's report to CSP4, which provides a clear and comprehensive list of steps that can be taken to minimize diversion risks. The remainder of this statement will focus on two elements of this morning's agenda. In the interest of time efficiency, I will address both of these elements now. First, we welcome the inclusion of an agenda item which seeks to identify diversion risk indicators. While some useful indicators can be inferred or extrapolated from the report to CSP4, which I referred a moment ago, it is worth noting that a number of exporting states have specific risk assessment guidance that include red flags or risk indicators. It could be useful, therefore, to gather examples of diversion risk indicators that are currently in use among states, with a specific focus on each phase in the arms transfer chain. Since most diversion cases occur once an arms shipment has left the exporting state, a focus on indicators for diversion during and after delivery is particularly important. And in light of the thematic focus of the CSP7 presidency, developing indicators for diversion risk based on inadequate or ineffective stockpile management procedures seems especially important. Control Arms also welcomes the inclusion of risk mitigation as an agenda item. In our view, mitigation does not always receive the attention it warrants. It is, however, critical that a clear distinction is made between standard export licensing procedures, such as requiring and verifying and end-use certificates, and mitigation measures, which are case-specific measures designed to respond to specific diversion risks that would otherwise result in a prospective transfer being refused or cast into serious doubt. Moreover, where diversion risks are identified, the mere adoption of a mitigation measure should not be considered enough to allow an arms export to go ahead. Only where mitigation efforts demonstrably reduce diversion risks to a low level should the transfer go forward. In this regard, an ongoing exchange among states concerning the diversion risk mitigation practices would also be a very useful step forward, developing common understanding in this area. We hope the close nature of the newly established Diversion Information Exchange Forum, substantive exchange on diversion risk will continue within this sub-working group of WGETI. This is not only because it is included in the WGETI's mandate as adopted in CSP3, but because, as we've seen year after year, civil society, the private sectors, and other stakeholders have much to contribute in this area. Thank you, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you, Control Arms, for presenting your views. And now I'm giving the floor to People's Republic of China. Please.
感谢主席女士给我这个机会。
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. We appreciate the working paper submitted by you and also the further promotion efforts in terms of eliminate the risk of diversion and assessment of the risk. After careful consideration, China will respond to that document. Just now, we have listened carefully to the statements made by all parties and also the content of the discussion. We also believe that in some countries, in some state parties, capacity building is very important. China stands ready to participate in the related discussion and strengthen the exchange of views to explore more useful approaches. Today, I would like to share with you China's positions and practices in this regard. China believes that the illicit diversion of conventional arms fuels armed conflicts and behaviors that run counter to international humanitarian laws. It undermines regional security and stability. Countries must commit themselves to combating illicit arms trafficking and adopting measures to prevent illicit diversion of arms that was legitimately transferred. China has actively adopted measures to prevent illicit diversion of arms. China uses a qualification system dedicated to the sales of military items, which means only companies authorized by the government can export military items. Furthermore, from the phase of negotiations with foreign parties, contract execution to shipping and transportation, every step must be approved by the government. China only trades with sovereign countries in conventional military items and never with non-state actors. China explicitly requires the government of recipient countries to provide the end user and end-use certificate. and that they commit not to transfer to a third party arms imported from China without approval from China. These policies and practice help to lower the diversion risk of arms exported by China. China believes that the issue of diversion is also a matter of control regimes and practice of importing countries. Even with strict scrutiny by the export countries, the risk of diversion of arms still exists. This is a challenge all countries have to face too, and also requires their further coordination and cooperation so as to deal with it appropriately. China stands ready to actively explore solutions that are pragmatic, sensible, and effective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, China, for your comment. Now, as the list of delegates who would like to speak is already exhausted, I'm asking, is there anyone who would like to speak before we are going to the closing?
Madam Facilitator, from
Yes.
from our side, we don't have any delegation that requests to speak. So there's no person wishing to speak at present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I would like to thank to all delegations for participating to this working group meeting. Especially, I would like to thank to delegations who participate actively and who share their views and proposals for the future work of this sub-working group. We have opportunity to hear different approaches to this topic, but I have to say that all delegations recognize the importance of the diversion of prevention of diversion, and all delegation urge and call for a better international cooperation in order to have active feedback to possible diversion. I would like to thank to Secretariat for excellent organization of this virtual or hybrid session, and also I would like to thank to all technicians who made this meeting to make it possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator, for the kind words addressed to the Secretariat as well as all other delegations. We've come to the end of the sub-working group on Article 11. So that concludes the session dedicated to that sub-working group. In terms of our plan, we were supposed to proceed straight to the working group on transparency and reporting. At 2 o'clock, there was the initial planned time. However, because there had been some saving of time here, we propose that we take a break for about 7 minutes, 6-7 minutes, and resume at 13:30 Geneva time. So at present on my watch is 13:23, and then would resume at 13:30, 1:30 Geneva time. So we'll take a break and then resume at 13:30. Thank you so much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we would resume the meeting. As indicated before we had the break, we are going to have a discussion from now until 3 o'clock on transparency and reporting under the working group on transparency and reporting. There are two co-chairs who will be facilitating the discussion on that topic. The first one is Mr. Alejandro Alba from Mexico, and the second co-chair is Ms. Yulia Vladescu of Romania. I think at this point they are in position to take over. I'm informed that they are ready, they can see me, they can hear me, and without any further delay, I'll cross over to the two co-chairs of the working group on transparency and reporting. Mr. Alba, Ms. Vladescu, over to you.
Thank you, Dumisani. Could you please confirm that you can hear me well?
I can hear you very well and see you.
This is great. I will proceed with this meeting. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome everyone. I hope you are having a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are following us from today. And I thank you very much for joining us to this virtual meeting of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting of the Arms Trade Treaty. I am Yulia Vladescu. I work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Romania, and together with Mr. Alejandro Alba Fernandez from the Permanent Mission of Mexico in Geneva, we will be co-chairing the working group today for the next hour, as well as tomorrow when we will reconvene for a 3-hour session. We couldn't start this meeting without noting how the pandemic has created multiple challenges for all of us, including the cancellation of some ATT meetings last year that prevented us to progress with some aspects of our work. Therefore, the co-chairs would like to express their gratitude to the president of CSP7 for organizing this series of virtual meetings that allow us to keep the work of the ATT on track, and to extend their appreciation to the ATT Secretariat for its indispensable support in this regard. We will open the meeting with the adoption of the agenda. In this regard, the co-chairs would like to remind participants that during CSP6, states parties endorsed a number of standing agenda items and recurring and specific tasks for the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting for the period between CSP6 and CSP7. The standing agenda items that states parties instructed the working group to deal with as a minimum are the following: the state of play of compliance with reporting obligations, challenges concerning reporting, substantive reporting and transparency issues, organizational means for information exchange, IT platform, reporting and transparency functionalities, and the working group mandate in the period between CSP7 and CSP8. Under each of these standing agenda items, states parties charged the working group with both recurrent and specific tasks. In light of the reduced time allocated to this meeting due to its exceptional and unprecedented virtual format, the co-chairs have adapted the agenda in order to ensure that enough time is allocated for those topics that either may require a decision by CSP7 or are necessary to discuss, though they may not lead to a decision by this year's conference. Some of the topics that are omitted from the agenda can still be addressed in writing during remote consultations and further discussed in the CSP8 cycle. In this regard, with the kind assistance of the ATT Secretariat, on the 13th of April, announcements were circulated to all stakeholders, calling on them to submit proposals on those topics via email or the information exchange platform by the 9th of July this year. The co-chairs would also like to use this opportunity to encourage participants to submit written proposals on those topics. When deciding on which topics to address in writing, the co-chairs took into account the pending proposals which are under discussion, and the fact that due to the cancellation of some of the ATT meetings last year, no developments were possible in some areas. The draft annotated agenda for this virtual meeting, adjusted as explained, has been circulated on the 7th of April, together with an introductory paper that was prepared by the co-chairs in order to unpack the tasks of the working group for discussions in the period between CSP6 and CSP7, and to allow participants to prepare efficiently for this virtual meeting. The paper explains the background of the given tasks, summarizes past deliberations, sets out elements for discussion, and puts a number of proposals for the consideration of the participants. The co-chairs hope that the introductory paper was explicit enough and will help us ensure a structured and effective discussion during this meeting. We would like to note that in light of the ambitious agenda set for this virtual meeting and the tight schedule we are under, the co-chair's intention is to hold further remote consultations intersessionally in May and June to try to finalize documentation arising of this meeting that will be submitted to CSP7 for consideration and possible adoption or endorsement. I don't want to prolong this introduction anymore. So at this point, the co-chairs would like to ask participants if they have any remark about the draft annotated agenda, or if they want to propose additional agenda items under AOB. I have seen that Control Arms wishes to intervene under AOB. Please note that the co-chairs intend to address the topics in the order they appear on the agenda and address AOBs at the end of tomorrow's session. So please, if you have any remark or proposal that you would like to signal at this point, I invite you to use the chat function to request the floor. Please don't forget to indicate the name of the state or organization you are representing. Could I ask the Secretariat if anybody has asked for the floor?
No, we don't have, Ms.
Okay, then I take it that delegates find this agenda acceptable. Therefore, the co-chairs would like to declare the agenda adopted while looking forward to a constructive and lively debate during the meeting. So I think we shall move to the first agenda item, the state of play of compliance with reporting obligations. As explained, as you might recall, at every meeting, the working group reviews the status of reporting, focusing on the progress that has been made in comparison to the previous status update. Reviewing the status of reporting traditionally happens through a presentation by the ATT Secretariat. With regard to the previous status update, I would like to recall that an actual presentation was not possible with the CSP6 through written procedure. Therefore, the ATT Secretariat provided the overview as an annex of the co-chair's report to CSP6. This overview demonstrated a concerning continuous downward trend in compliance with the annual reporting obligation and an increase in the number of reports that were made available only to states parties. Besides, it revealed that a significant number of states parties still had to submit their initial report to the treaty. I believe you are all very interested to see how the situation has evolved ever since. I know I am. So without further delays, I would like to give the floor to the ATT Secretariat to brief us on this matter. So please, if you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. The Secretariat would start with a presentation on status of reporting. And Ms. Sarah Parker, the Senior Policy Officer at the Secretariat, would deliver the presentation. Over to you, Ms. Parker.
Thank you very much, Dumasani, and thank you to the co-chairs for the invitation to give an overview of the current status of ATT reporting. And good afternoon, everybody. Just before I start, I would like to just let you know that the presentation is available online. We've included a link in the chat function for those of you that maybe can't see it very clearly or would like to refer to it later. And for the interpreters, my speaking notes are on the Dropbox. I will try not to speak too quickly, but I am aware that we are a bit short of time, so I may not dwell on certain slides in a fashion that we normally might. Right, so just to remind ourselves, what are the reporting obligations under the ATT? Article 13.1 of the treaty requires states parties to submit an initial report on their implementation of the treaty within a year of the treaty entering into force for each state. And Article 13.3 requires states parties to submit an annual report on their imports and exports. I'm going to start with a look at the initial reports and giving both a global overview as well as a regional breakdown. And I will then do the same with respect to annual reports, giving the global and regional picture. So starting with initial reports and the global overview. Oops. To date, the treaty has 110 states parties, and of those, by now, 105 should have submitted an initial report. That is 95% of states parties. Currently, 80 states parties have done so. So this means 76% of states parties that were due to report have done so. 25 states that should have submitted their initial report have not yet done so. That's 24%. How does this compare to where we were when we presented this information in February last year? Well, at that point, 75% of states parties that were due to submit their initial report had done so. So we see some progress. We're now at 76%. We received 6 new initial reports since February last year. But of course, the number of states parties that should have submitted a report has also obviously increased as more states have joined the treaty. On the next slide, we provided some additional information on initial reports. As you will recall, states parties have the option to request that their initial report not be made public. 17 states have requested their initial reports not be made public. That is 21% of initial reports submitted. In February last year, that figure was at 16%. So these reports are available to states parties on the restricted area of the website only. We've also given an indication of whether initial reports were submitted on time. And with respect to initial reports that we've received so far, 42 of them, or 53%, were submitted on time or before they were due. Finally, a total of 67 states that submitted their initial reports, that is 84%, used the reporting template that was endorsed by CSP2 and which will be the subject of discussions this afternoon. I'm now going to take a look at reporting at the regional level. In this slide, we have an overview of participation in the reporting process by region. We've based the regional classification on the UN Statistics Division classification. The green, of course, indicates states parties in the region that were due to report and have done so, and the red indicates states parties in the region that were due to report and submit an initial report but have not yet done so. So if we look at Africa on the first row, we see that there are 13 states parties that should have submitted an initial report and have done so, and there are 13 that should have submitted a report and have not done so as yet, so 50%. With respect to the Americas, we see there are 18 states parties that have submitted an initial report, and 9 states parties that have not yet done so. Moving on to annual reports. This slide gives a summary of how many annual reports were due, submitted, not made public, and submitted on time for all the reporting years so far, so from 2015 to 2019. We've reconfigured this table from previous versions, for those of you that recall, because it's starting to get a little bit unwieldy as we have more and more years of reporting to report on. So we're trying to simplify the information as best as possible. So I'm going to explain the information that's contained in each column. The first column obviously indicates the year that we are referring to, 2015, 16, 17, and so on. The second column tells us how many annual reports were due each year. So in 2015, 61 annual reports were due, and in 2015, 61 reports, 2016, 75 annual reports, and so on. And obviously, as the number of states parties has grown, so has the number of states that must submit annual reports. Column 3 tells us how many annual reports were submitted each year in terms of the actual number, as well as the percentage of reports due. So for 2015, we see that 49 annual reports were submitted, and that is 80% of the annual reports that were due for that year. So this was a relatively good year, and in fact, the best year that we've had so far. The fourth column indicates how many states parties submitted a report even though they were not yet required to. So those are the enthusiastic states parties among you. These have not been factored into the percentages, but they are there for your information. So in 2015, 3 states parties submitted an annual report even though they were not required to. Column 5 tells us how many states parties were supposed to submit an annual report in a given year but did not. So in 2015, there were 12 states parties due to report that didn't. Down to 2019, there were 37 states, or 38%, that did not. And column 6 indicates how many states requested that their annual reports be made available to states parties only. And we can see that this has risen from 1 report in 2015, or 2%, to 12, or 20%, in 2019. With respect to timeliness, states parties are due to submit their annual reports by 31 May each year. We see a lot of states parties submitting their reports within 2 or 3 days of the deadline, so we give some leeway when we're assessing whether they submitted them on time, and anyone who reports within 7 days of the deadline is regarded as having submitted on time. And the final column gives an indication of how many states parties submitted their annual reports on time each year. As I said, this information is available on the website, so I would encourage you to take your time to review it there. I think the next time we may add a column for the reporting format that was used to monitor the use of the online reporting tool. For 2019 reports, 12 states used the online reporting tool to submit their annual report, and 3 submitted their UNROCA report, that is the UN Register on Conventional Arms. I should mention, of course, that we are just under 1 month away from the reporting deadline for the 2020 annual reports, which is the 31st of May 2021. So far, we have received 2 annual reports for 2020. We will be sending out a reminder to all states parties regarding the deadline very soon. I think that's probably Monday's to-do list. And here I've just given you a chart that displays the information that I've just discussed. So we can see that a high proportion of states parties fulfilled their obligation to submit annual reports in 2015, but things are arguably evening out over 2017 and 2018. And I think that we can still expect the figure for 2019 to change. At the moment at 62%. I say this because, for example, we received an annual report for 2019 as recently as April 2021, and likewise we received a report for 2018 in April 2020. So states do submit their reports several years after they're due in some isolated instances. So if we now look at regional participation in annual reporting, this chart shows us the percentage of states parties in each region that should have submitted annual reports each year and did so. And it shows the information by region and year. So if you look at the first set of columns, for example, it shows reporting by states parties in Africa. The dark blue column tells us that 71% of states parties in Africa that should have reported in 2015 did so. The yellow column tells us that 46% did so in 2016. The orange column tells us 29% did so in 2017. The green column tells us that 36% did in 2018, and the aqua blue column tells us that 22% did so for 2019. And so you can see the yearly rates of reporting for each region as you move across the chart, but I'm not going to go into detail here because of time constraints. But one thing I do want to do, or we did want to do, was just take a couple of minutes to describe some new features that we've added to the webpage for annual reports. You will be as pleased as I am to learn that I'm not going to give a live demonstration, but I have taken some static shots of the new version of the reporting page. So for those of you that are familiar with the reporting page for annual reports, it's basically a large table of who has reported when, with the column states parties listed in the first column and then the years along the top. What we have introduced now, if you look on the left side of the screen, you'll see a text that says export data to an Excel file. And this allows you to export the information in the table into an Excel file that will look something like this. And this will allow the researchers among you to manipulate and play with the data a bit more easily. And I'm hoping there are some of you out there that are excited by this feature. An additional feature that we've added is something on the right-hand side called Reduce Table. We're conscious that the table is growing and growing, and this is part of the reason we've introduced these features. So this feature allows you to reduce the size of the table and condense the information, so it ends up looking something like this, which would allow you a snapshot on screen for those of you that just want to get an overview of all the information. If you experiment with the web page, you will also find that we have frozen the first column and added a scroll bar at the bottom of the screen, not the bottom of the page, which was the design before, but so now you can scroll across without losing sight of which states party you are viewing. I realize this is a lot of information to take in. As I said, the presentation is available on the website, and we do encourage you to use the annual reports webpage and do give us any feedback if there are things you think could be further improved. And with that, I thank the co-chairs once again, and we remain at your disposal for further questions. Thank you.
Many thanks to the Secretariat for this very informative presentation, as well as for their continued support with managing the reports, and also for the improvements they have made to the reporting page in order to enhance its user-friendliness. The co-chairs are happy to note that there has been some progress since the Secretariat's last update on the matter, although the reporting rates are still quite disappointing. It is concerning that more than 1/3 of states parties still haven't met their annual reporting obligations, and almost a quarter have difficulties in meeting their initial reporting requirement. Since the deadline for submitting the 2020 annual report is approaching, the co-chairs hope to see better figures this year. We commend the states parties that have already submitted their 2020 report, and we encourage others to follow their example. This being said, what I would like to do now is open the floor for delegations who would like to share their views on the state of play of compliance with the reporting obligation. We will start with a list of speakers provided by the ATT Secretariat this morning. Participants who have not requested to be included in the list of speakers are still able to request to take the floor by sending a message through the chat function, indicating the name of the state or organization that wishes to speak, as well as the name of the delegate who will speak. We would like to ask everyone to keep their interventions brief and to the point, given the ambitious agenda for this meeting and the tight schedule we are under. Please note that we will be tracking the time to finish the discussion on time and continue with other items on the agenda. And if necessary, we will close the list of speakers at some point. So on the list of speakers, we have France, Nigeria, and Control Arms so far. And now I would like to give the floor to France.
Oui, avec plaisir.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. I hope you can hear me properly, and I hope you can see me, because I can only see the Secretariat PowerPoint. Thank you. So I would like to thank first the Secretariat for this recap, which is very complete concerning reports. which is essential for transparency and implementation of our treaty. And like you, Madam Co-Chair, my delegation expresses some concerns on the very low rate of response of initial and annual reports. This is not satisfactory, and we have to do better. Madam Co-Chair, as you know, my country gives very special importance to the compliance of its obligations in relation to Article 13. Each year, we submit a report on exports and imports of conventional weapons, which are pertinent to the TCA, to the ATT, and other reports which are sent by France on transfer of arms, including the one which is sent each year to the French Parliament, which is the first to be informed on the export of arms, and completes our transmission report to the UN conventional arms. And in France, within the European Union, or exchange of information that we have on a regular basis with the OSCE. My country would like to recall that all these reports are accessible online and can be seen by any parties concerned, civil society, or third-party states. We continue to call upon all states to comply with their obligations within the ATT and encourage all state parties to make public their reports. Madam Co-Chair, we don't have any special comments to make as to the adaptations which have been suggested on the model of initial reports or annual reports. We have noted, however, that there's addition of a section which aims at authorizing the UN disarmament unit to use the pertinent information contained in annual reports for the UN Register on Traditional Weapons. And in this respect, we encourage the research of synergies, recalling that parties on arms trade have the possibility of relying to the annual contribution to the register in preparing the ATT report, a tool which already exists and which can be used to improve the response rate, and which is an obligation within the context of the treaty. Thank you very much, and full success in the future work.
Thank you, Franz, for your remarks and for your commitment to the treaty's objectives, and also for encouraging synergies between reporting to UN ROCA and the ATT. Next on the speakers list is Nigeria. So Nigeria, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Co-chair.
There's a connection problem, unfortunately. It is necessary to disconnect and reconnect. Unfortunately, we cannot interpret the sound that we hear.
Could I please ask the delegation of Nigeria to stop? Because there seem to be some technical problems. Perhaps we can move to the next speaker on the speaker list and get back to Nigeria afterwards.
Okay. Can you come back to us later?
So may I call on Control Arms to speak now, and then we will come back to Nigeria.
Great. Thank you, Co-Chair. The ATT Monitor, an independent project of Control Arms, would first like to commend both group co-chairs and the ATT Secretariat on the efforts taken to continue the important work of supporting states parties in fulfilling reporting obligations. As the challenges raised by COVID-19 circumstances have yet to subside, these efforts are especially appreciated as a useful means of moving work forward without the opportunity for in-person discussions. ATT Monitor analysis of 2019 ATT annual reports shows that challenges raised by COVID-19 may have affected some states' parties' ability to submit reports last year. The on-time completion rate for 2019 annual reports is the lowest of any year at 38%, as is the overall reporting compliance rate at 62%. The public health crisis forced many governments to change their work patterns to focus on more immediate priorities and to accommodate a virtual environment. Government officials may have had limited capacities or limited access to the information necessary to complete their reports. However, despite these challenges, the geographic and systemic diversity of those that were able to report by the deadline demonstrates that lack of political will likely remains a significant impediment to ATT reporting. It may be the case that challenges raised by COVID-19 will again affect states' parties' ability to submit reports this year, and ongoing analysis of reporting trends will have to take stock of such challenges when identifying reporting patterns over time. To better support states' parties in fulfilling reporting obligations, the ATT Monitor will be interested in identifying why COVID-19 may have prevented challenges for states' parties and in developing recommendations to help increase resilience in reporting capacity. Because annual reporting is an obligation in Article 13.3, there is still work to be done to support full compliance of these obligations by all states parties now and in the future. Private reporting continues to pose a challenge to transparency. The rate of public reporting continued to drop with the submission of 2019 annual reports, as only 49% of states parties obliged to submit a report submitted one that was publicly available, and several states appear to have altered their reporting behaviors towards more privacy. The continued trend of private reporting is concerning, as private reports create a challenge for identifying global arms exports and imports, prevent a public accounting of arms sales, and impede the identification of troubling transfers or potentially troubling arms accumulations. As with annual reports, there remains an upward trend towards private reporting for initial reports, as 21% of all those submitted are confidential. Additionally, 24% of states parties due to submit an initial report have yet to do so. The lack of updates to initial reports, however, is also concerning, as each state party has an obligation to report to the ATT Secretariat on any new measures undertaken in order to implement the treaty. So far, only 5 states have provided such updates. We welcome new updates from states such as Belgium, who have recently signaled its intentions to provide relevant information on updated national systems. The ATT Monitor supports the efforts by the Working Group and ATT Secretariat in increasing states parties' awareness of this obligation and in supporting states in making such updates, including amendments to initial reporting templates. We look forward to these discussions in the agenda items to follow. Thank you.
Thank you for this very valuable contribution to our discussion, as well as for the important work conducted by the ATT Monitor that supports reporting and transparency in the ATT. I would suggest now to go back to Nigeria if they had managed to solve their connection issues.
Yes, we have. Thank you very much, Co-Chair.
Great. We can hear you loud and clear now. Perfect. Go ahead, please.
The Nigerian delegation extends its warm regards to the co-chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting. We also appreciate your excellent work in coordinating the affairs of the Working Group. The co-chairs, Nigeria signed and ratified the ATT in August 2013. As a mark of our sincere commitment and endorsement of ATT as a multilateral treaty, which seeks to regulate the international trade in small arms and light weapons, as well as promote accountability and transparency by state parties involved in the business of transfer of conventional arms. Nigeria submitted its initial report in December 2015. But yet to submit any annual report since then. The non-submission of annual reports has been traced to poor understanding of the treaty and capacity gaps among the relevant stakeholders, especially in terms of their respective roles in meeting the reporting obligations. As you are aware, Article 16.3 of the ATT provides for the establishment of a voluntary trust fund to support national implementation of the treaty. In our efforts to strengthening capacity towards meeting our responsibilities to the treaty, Nigeria submitted a proposal titled Strengthening Interagency Cooperation for Treaty Implementation and Reporting under the 2020 VTF cycle. Following all the due process and the subsequent approval of the project by the VTF Selection Committee, I am pleased to inform you that Nigeria signed the grant agreement with the ATT Secretariat on 9th March 2021. The project is to run from 11th January to 31st October, and the first tranche of the project sum was received on 24th March 2021. As a result, activities towards the implementation of the project have since commenced in line with the agreed work schedule. At the moment, a needs assessment is being conducted and the report is being finalized by the consultants. Similarly, the project implementation partner has already researched, contacted, and interviewed some foreign-based consultants, as well as signed agreements with 2 that would develop the relevant training manuals. The needs assessment report on completion will be presented to the foreign consultants for development of the training manuals. In line with the schedule, the training manuals will be finalized on or before the end of May 2021. Permit me to also report the preliminary preparations arrangements for the National Training Workshop to be organized in June 2021 for the relevant stakeholders are also ongoing. The co-chair, we strongly believe that the implementation of this project will not only enhance Nigeria's capacity to meet the treaty implementing and reporting obligations in terms of timely submission of accurate, verifiable, and up-to-date annual reports, but also help in deepening the interagency cooperation with regards to the country's overall responsibility as far as the ATT is concerned. We therefore assure that Nigeria is on course and fully committed to ensure the successful implementation of this VTF-funded project. Lastly, we seize this opportunity to express our appreciation to the donor states and the VTF Selection Committee for this grant intervention. We also thank the ATT Secretariat for the administrative support to ensure effective implementation of the project. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigeria, for sharing your national experience with us. We are glad to see the positive results coming out of the VTF project. May I ask the Secretariat if there are any other requests for the floor? At this point.
Madam Co-Chair, we've got China. We have requested the floor.
Okay, then I invite China to take the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We would like to thank your excellent work and the explanations provided by you just now. Also, we would like to thank the Secretariat for their presentation, which is really helpful for us to understanding the current trend of reporting. China believes that the reporting system can improve the transparency of arms trade and enhance mutual trust among countries, which is of great significance to the realization of the purposes and objectives of the treaty. China supports the improvement of this system. In recent years, China has actively submitted reports to the UN Register of Conventional Arms. providing data on transfers of 7 categories of conventional arms every year as required. Ever since China's accession to the ATT, work has been underway to prepare the initial and annual reports in compliance with the treaty. We will submit these reports on time as required by the treaty. China notes that the Secretariat has promptly completed the Chinese translation of the reports templates and uploaded them to the treaty website, which greatly facilitated our efforts in coordinating domestic competent authorities and experts to draft the reports. China appreciates this. China notes that the treaty still faces challenges in improving the rate and quality of reporting. China is willing to work with all parties to actively promote the submission of reports by all state parties on time and as required so as to fulfill their obligations under the treaty. At the same time, we encourage state parties to use the templates to submit the reports, improve information transparency, and share experience and practices with other state parties. Regarding the revision of the initial and annual reports templates, China is studying the suggested revisions and explanations provided by the co-chair and appreciates efforts made by the co-chair of the working group. Concerning section 1.1 of the table on page 23 of the document, China notes that in this section, Wassenaar Arrangement and the EU Common Military List have been added. However, this mechanism and list are not widely representative, so China suggests to delete them. Yet, relevant countries can voluntarily provide information on these mechanisms when submitting their reports. As to whether to make national reports publicly available, China is in favor of making them public on the internet with the consent of the countries concerned. China is willing to actively consider make future reports publicly available on the internet. Thank you.
Thank you, China, for your intervention, and we look forward to reading China's reports. With regard to your comments on the reporting templates, please note that the co-chairs intend to address the discussion on reporting templates tomorrow, but we have noted your comments in this regard. Are there any other requests for the floor under this agenda item?
Madam Co-Chair, no, we don't have any other requests for the floor under this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I would like to close the discussion on this topic here, but of course not without thanking to all participants that have spoken under this agenda item for their support and commitment to the treaty's objective of transparency in international arms trade. I have noted the concerns raised with regard to the relatively high number of states parties which are in breach of reporting, which is one of the most fundamental obligations of the treaty, and a call on those states to demonstrate their commitment to the treaty by submitting their reports. And in addition, we have heard concerns about the trend of making the reports available to states parties only, thereby undermining the treaty's objective of transparency. Now that we found out where we stay in terms of compliance with reporting, I guess it is the perfect time to move to the next agenda item, which refers to challenges concerning reporting. I recall that the co-chair's intention is to address the first 3 tasks under this agenda item during this session and continue tomorrow with the discussion on the reporting templates. In the interest of time and to avoid situations when participants would have to take the floor too many times in this virtual setting, the co-chairs will first introduce all 3 topics and then open the floor for comments and reactions. we would like to ask participants to limit their interventions to the topics that are under consideration during today's session, and keep any remark they might have on the reporting templates for tomorrow, when they will have the opportunity to share their views on the matter. So I shall start with the introduction of the first task, which is also a recurring one, under which participants have the opportunity to share any challenges to submitting timely and accurate initial and annual reports they are facing. We would like to recall that this is traditionally included in the working group mandate to offer states parties a continuous platform to share problems and difficulties, as well as solutions and good practice in the organization and fulfillment of the reporting obligations. We are certain that COVID-19 has also presented a series of challenges to transparency and reporting in the ATT, with all the severe lockdowns that have been implemented by many of our governments, which led many of us to work from home. Some states were not able to meet the reporting deadline. As it has recently come to the attention of the co-chairs that the challenges posed by the pandemic have provoked not only difficulties in gathering data that was necessary for compiling the reports, but also misunderstandings in the communication between those who were responsible for compiling the report and those responsible for submitting it to the ATT Secretariat, for instance, between the capital and the missions in Geneva. The co-chairs would like to strongly encourage all the representatives of states parties to check if their report was received by the Secretariat and posted on the website in accordance with their preference. In any case, while the challenges faced by governments due to the pandemic might have caused delays in reporting, as previously mentioned, the negative trend of the reporting rate threatens to undermine the treaty's objective of transparency and confidence building in the global arms trade. The co-chairs would like to call on states parties to share any challenges to submitting timely and accurate initial and annual reports they are facing, and particularly states parties that have not yet complied with all their reporting obligations are urged to share the obstacles that have kept them from doing so. I will stop here and let my co-chair continue with the introduction of the next two tasks, and then we will open the floor for comments and remarks as explained earlier. So Alejandro, over to you.
Thank you very much, Julia. I hope everyone can hear me well. Well, next item on the agenda concerns the outreach strategy on reporting, which is a recurring task in the working group. As you will recall, CSP5 established the mandate for the presidents of the conference of the states parties to engage in bilateral contacts with the state parties that are in arrears with their reporting obligations. Last year, due to the written format of the CSP6, there was no opportunity to inform the participants about the efforts made by the Argentine presidency in this regard. For this reason, in our introductory document, the co-chairs provided the details of the actions carried out by the president of CSP6, which are summarized in the delivery of 38 individualized letters to states parties that must present reports. In our introductory document, we also reported on the efforts made by the CSP7 president, Ambassador Lanzana Gellery, with the delivery of 48 individualized letters. The co-chairs will follow up with the Secretariat of the ATT about the results of these efforts, and will report on this later. We acknowledge the efforts of the CSP presidencies in but it is striking that the number of countries contacted on this issue has been increasing, and today there seems to be no relevant impact on the improvement of the reporting rate. Therefore, we encourage the states parties that have received these letters to share their challenges and difficulties in submitting their reports. And we would also like to encourage the participants of the working group to continue looking for ways and mechanisms to improve the reporting rate. The BTF is a very valuable resource for capacity building. Its use is to strengthen reporting capacities, has been used moderately, but with good results, as shared by one state party in the last face-to-face meeting of the working group in February 2020. We would like to also to share with you that since November last year, the co-chairs contacted several countries that have benefited from BTF resources to strengthen their reporting capacities and invited them to share in this meeting their experiences, the operation of their projects, the benefits of the BTF, and the results in terms of the improvement of their capacities. We obtained expressions of interest from some of them, and therefore we wanted to give the opportunity to these countries to share their experience. In this regard, we would like to thank Nigeria for their remarks on this topic shared in the previous agenda item. And we encourage other BTF beneficiaries to share their experiences in later discussions. Then the next point is about the fact-type guidance document on the annual reporting obligation. Which you may recall that was adopted.
We have great difficulty, interpreters have great difficulty in understanding what the speaker is saying.
Okay, I just received. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah. Then I will continue. This document was adopted at the CSP3 and updated at CSP5 to reflect amendments related to the introduction of the online reporting tool. As you know, this is a recurring task within the reporting challenges agenda item, and is included with the intention of providing a space for participants to submit proposals for challenges or additional questions that should be considered by the working group. As you will recall, in our introductory document for this meeting circulated on 7 April, the co-chairs invited the participants to submit any proposals in this regard via email or through the information exchange platform 10 days before this meeting. Subsequently, with the support of the Secretariat, we informed participants about the publication of various announcements in the information exchange platform. One of those announcements was about the extension of the date to present proposals to this document until April 23rd. Today, we must inform the participants that the co-chairs did not receive specific proposals on this document via email or through the information exchange platform. Unless there is a specific proposal that a participant wishes to present at this occasion, we will propose to leave open the possibility to submit proposals or contributions via email or the information exchange platform until 9 July of this year, with the intention that these proposals can be discussed in the CSP8 cycle. With this, I would like to start with the speakers list that I have provided by the Secretariat. And I will first call the European Union to share their remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states, the candidate countries, the Republic of North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Albania, the country of the stabilization and association process and potential candidate, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the EFTA country, Iceland, member of the European Economic Area, as well as the Republic of Moldova and Georgia, aligned themselves with this statement. The EU supports the principles of cooperation, responsibility, and transparency in the international arms trade, enshrined in the Arms Trade Treaty. Transparency and reporting are key elements leading to confidence building among states and ensuring the full and effective implementation of the treaty. Reporting on arms exports and imports represents one of the cornerstone obligations of the ATT. We therefore reiterate our call on all state parties to fulfill their reporting obligations in a timely and transparent manner. It is regrettable that since our last discussion on this issue, the number of reports has decreased substantially for the period of 2019. We hope to see better figures this year and would like to take the opportunity to draw attention to the upcoming deadline for submitting the annual report for 2020. We commend all states parties that have already filed their annual report for 2020 and encourage others to follow suit without delay and to share the reports publicly. There are many reasons for the current low reporting rate, and we must discuss these and find practical ways to overcome them. The EU stands ready to assist, and in this regard, we recall that the EU outreach program of an amount of 9 million euro has been extended for another year in October 2020. Among the initiatives that can be developed under this program are those aiming at strengthening national reporting capabilities and making national reporting procedures more efficient in line with the provisions of the treaty. States in need are also encouraged to make a good use of the voluntary trust fund for the purpose of establishing or improving their reporting capabilities. On our side, the 2022 EU annual report on exports of military technology and equipment represents a significant tool in enhancing transparency in the international arms trade. Released in October 2020, the report is publicly available in the form of a searchable online database on the website of the European External Action Service. It allows stakeholders and interested members of the public to consult and analyze the data on member states' arms exports in a user-friendly manner. Yet again, the EU annual report displays the number and value of authorized exports for all destination countries, the type of military technology involved, and the number of denials per type of military technology and destination country, as well as the criteria that were invoked as the reason for the denial. All this information is publicly available, accessible to all. We reaffirm our commitment to transparency in international arms trade, and we have taken a number of concrete measures in order to facilitate correct, coherent, and timely reporting on member states' arms exports. We call on all states parties to decide in favor of the option of non-confidential reporting, which clearly increases the relevance of the reports and facilitates accountability for export decisions. We are grateful to the ATT Secretariat for their continued sharing of updates on the number of initial and annual reports, which help us to track progress. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, European Union, for your remarks and also for sharing with us your reports in this field. And we certainly commend your activities and commitment on fulfilling this reporting obligation. Thank you very much for that. And then I will continue with the speakers list. I will call Switzerland, please.
Thank you, co-chairs. Let me first of all express Switzerland's gratitude for your much appreciated work in light of the unfavorable circumstances related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Switzerland strongly encourages state parties to not only submit their reports according to the obligation defined in Article 13 of the treaty, but also to make their reports publicly available and to use the online reporting tool for submitting their reports. This not only improves transparency, but also allows for an easier comparison of the data submitted. Concerning agenda item 2, where we are in at the moment, recurring task 6 of this drafted annotated agenda, Switzerland fully agrees with the draft amended templates concerning the initial and annual reports. That means Annex A and B of the introductory paper issued by this group for this meeting, and thanks to co-chairs and the ATT Secretariat for the added explanatory notes. We would like to emphasize that annual reports should at least, and I make a little jump here to agenda item 3, include a similar level of information as those submitted to UN-ROCA. Anything less would fail to meet the objective of the treaty set out in Article 1 to promote transparency, cooperation, and responsible action by states. The disaggregation of data is crucial in our view. Only such kind of data offers a level of detail that allows for the meaningful assessment of the information contained in annual reports. In addition, it allows states parties, signatories, civil society, etc., to compare the data submitted to the ATT. I also would like to refer to agenda item 5, specific task 4, and would like to mention that Switzerland welcomes the background paper prepared by the ATT Secretariat, which means Annex C of the introductory paper. After having agreed on the parameters for a searchable online database, we should swiftly implement it. The information that such a database provides should be disaggregated, publicly available, and user-friendly. The aim should be to provide a tool that eventually becomes the standard reference for global arms transfers. We would therefore welcome a sophisticated tool that performs automatic calculations and enables users to visualize the data made available. The main benefits of an ATT searchable online database are, in our view, as follows. It enables a better comparison of data to all possible users, boosts transparency, enhances the treaty's visibility globally, and in comparison to other online databases, the information would not be limited to a region, as for instance, in the COARM database. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Switzerland. Very important points expressed, and thank you for your expressions of support to the work of the co-chairs. Yes, I would like to mention that we will have separate discussions on the agenda items that you have addressed in your remarks. And we take good note of your comments, and we'll take them into account for the follow-up of each of the agenda items that you mentioned. Thank you very much. Then the next on my list is Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Can you hear me well?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you. I will switch to Spanish then. Mi delegación desea reconocer el trabajo.
My delegation wishes to appreciate the work carried out by the co-chairs from this working group.
Reconocemos que la cooperación y la transparencia.
Cooperation and transparency promote confidence among states and help to attain peace and maintain security at a regional and international level. Nonetheless, transparency and cooperation can only be implemented if there is enough timely information. State parties can help to accomplish this objective by reporting annually with disaggregate data that is exact. Mexico reiterates its support with the treaty, and we recognize that this pandemic has obstacleized the usual working of the state parties and has required an enhanced cooperation at a regional and international level for states to be able to submit their reports. In Mexico's experience, interagency cooperation has facilitated submission of our reports thanks to the National Secretariat, which is the competent authority for transparency, and their relationship with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is the authority that supervises treaties like the ATT. My delegation would like to inform you that during the first months of this year, Mexico and Control Arms prepared the Spanish version of the ATT for 2020. The end product was submitted at the beginning of this month in a virtual event addressed to Latin American Caribbean countries. The template for the treaty in Spanish includes important information like the difficulty of complying with the obligation of submitting reports. We need to realize and acknowledge what has made it impossible for us to submit reports. And in this sense, we need to listen to national authorities that are involved in the establishment and presentation of reports for the ATT and for other international instruments. Each state party has its own circumstances and their practices can serve others. And we also need to recognize the fruits we can obtain from international cooperation with the other programs, like the example mentioned by the EU. We also need to improve our national capacities to comply with our reporting obligation. That's all on our side. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mexico, for sharing your experience, your practice in reporting, also for sharing your efforts on outreach activities and your collaboration with Control Arms to translate into Spanish the ATT Monitor 2020, which we are well aware that focus on the trends in reporting is a very valuable document, and also for mentioning the collaboration that you have with the European Union and the other international cooperation opportunities in this regard. Thank you very much. Then I would like to give the floor to the Republic of Korea. Hello, is the Republic of Korea available? If that is not the case, I will go to the next speaker and then try to contact the Republic of Korea later. Then I would like to call Nonviolence International Southeast Asia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, for this opportunity to speak. Nonviolence International Southeast Asia would like to commend the extensive work done so far by the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting and the ATT Secretariat in ensuring that reports are completed and submitted on time. And we welcome especially your emphasis that states requiring assistance in completing their reports are provided opportunities through the Voluntary Trust Fund or other bilateral engagements. Reporting of and transparency and national control mechanisms are essential to evaluating the level of compliance to the Arms Trade Treaty that states have achieved. Based on our work with governments in Asia, the primary difficulty that developing countries experience in completing reports in general is related to the collection and verification of information due to their limited availability, or the information may be scattered among different government agencies. For example, multiple government agencies may share responsibility in multiple stages of a weapon's life cycle and may develop their own agency-specific procedures for managing and storing weapons. These procedures will vary within the military compared to with law enforcement or deputized agencies. Even within law enforcement, different provincial stations will develop their own procedures depending on the security situation. And so in providing assistance to states, it will be important to determine if there are interagency arrangements to harmonize these procedures and identify any weaknesses and bottlenecks from there. Local verification missions, especially in port of entries, could be one starting point. Local civil society organizations are poised to work with states on these activities as they are closest on the ground and should be tapped to extend assistance. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you very much for your intervention. And next on my list, I would like to call Belgium, please.
Thank you. Alejandro, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, as previous co-chair of this working group, I first want to thank you, Alejandro, for our excellent cooperation as co-chairs last year, and you, Julia, for skillfully taking over the role of co-chair. I'm confident that under your chairmanship, this working group will be able to continue delivering meaningful, concrete outcomes. Just a quick intervention from my part on the topic of reporting outreach as a follow-up to the statement of the European Union and the reference to the EU ATT outreach program. As one of the presenters, I just wanted to refer to a relevant activity that was organized in the context of the program in October last year. As part of the ATT webinar series, we had a very comprehensive webinar dedicated to the annual report and the assistance that is available on how to prepare the report. The webinar is available to everyone on YouTube, and I will share the link in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom, for your kind words. And also wanted to appreciate your extensive work done as a co-chair in the last cycle. Thank you very much. And also thank you for sharing the webinar that you mentioned. Next, I would like to call Republic of Korea, if now they are available.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'll be the alternative speaker for Republic of Korea. I appreciate co-chairs for their endless work and devotion to develop our discussion on transparency and reporting throughout last year's written consultation and the CSP6. The Republic of Korea would like to express our concern about the continuous decline in the initial and in the annual reporting rates, despite the increasing numbers of states parties. The initial and annual reporting is the first and foremost responsibility of the states parties, supporting the effective implementation of the ATT. Therefore, we hope all states parties to fulfill their reporting obligations as soon as possible. The Republic of Korea found that the peer-to-peer assistance, events supporting report submission in various languages, which took place during a CSP6 working group meeting last year, was very useful in helping those with difficulties in writing their reports. It is considerable to hold such an event through online in that it could be cost saving and equally effective as in-person peer-to-peer assistance. In that case, the Republic of Korea will actively participate in the event. We appreciate the ATT Secretariat for the preparation of the background paper related to considerations for a searchable online database. We need to take a closer look at the cost-benefit analysis, possible differentiation from the existing arms trade database, and etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, South Korea, and thank you for sharing with us your activities, and really welcome your participation in the initiative that you mentioned. And about the searchable online tool, we will have the discussion tomorrow, but we are taking into account your comment. Then I have exhausted the list that I have of registered speakers. But I would like to ask the Secretariat if they have, I don't know, request for the floor in the chat function.
Mr. Co-Chair, yes, we have one request for the floor, and it comes from South Africa. Thank you.
All right, please, South Africa.
Thank you, Co-Chair. My delegation extends our gratitude to the co-chairs for this working group for their hard work conducted during this very challenging time.
The sound is a very poor quality, unfortunately. We cannot hear or understand this gentleman. This is a comment from the interpreters.
Okay, can you hear me now?
That is a bit better. Try and speak slowly and clearly, please.
Okay. My delegation extends our gratitude to the co-chairs in this working group for their hard work and leadership conducted during this very challenging times. Reporting is a mandatory aspect of the treaty and has great relevance to the functioning of the Arms Trade Treaty regime. In this regard, the initiatives of the Transparency and Reporting Working Group to assist state parties are recommended and lauded. We encourage the co-chairs to continue to work towards improving the reporting capacity by state parties. According to South Africa, the discussions on the public availability of annual and initial reports had been settled as far as we are concerned before the CSP2. And we would like to highlight that this discussion can have unintended consequences, such as states that previously provided reports only to state parties would then make their reports public, but would leave out information that they would have previously reported on. This could potentially compromise the quality of the reports. In terms of aggregation of data, very similar to our concerns above, it's already a challenge for some state parties to submit reports timeously, and we must guard against imposing more reporting obligations. We think that the idea of the creation of a searchable database is a very good idea. It makes sense, but like everything else, it will depend on the cost as new aspects of IT systems will have to be developed. So thank you, Co-Chair, for giving me the floor.
Thank you, South Africa. And yes, we will take well note of your comments. Please, I have to encourage everyone who have spoken and shared their experience here to submit your written statements to the Secretariat so we can have a proper account of your comments expressed in today's session. And then I would like to ask the Secretariat if they have noticed anyone else who wants to take the floor through the chat function.
Mr. Co-Chair, I confirm that there is no any other request for the floor from the chat function.
Okay, thank you very much. And then having exhausted the list of speakers and having confirmed that there is no more requests to the floor, on behalf of the co-chairs, we wish to thank all the participants and also those that intervened. Also, we thank the Secretariat, interpreters, and the technical staff that made this session possible. It has been a very rich and extensive discussion. We invite you to participate in the working group meeting tomorrow. We will address the rest of the agenda items, including discussions on the possible update on the reporting templates, the public availability of reports, the aggregation of data in reports, and others, as you have already addressed in your remarks. Without any further comment, I would like to give the floor to the head of the ATT Secretariat for possible announcements and final comments. Thank you very much.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank the co-chairs of the Working Group on Transparency and Reporting for concluding part of their program for this week. As confirmed by themselves, they are continuing tomorrow, starting at 12 o'clock to 1500 hours Geneva time. So the items that are not discussed today will be discussed tomorrow as per plan. The final announcements I would like to make at this hour before we adjourn the meeting is firstly that there is a side event that is taking place after this meeting. It will start at 15:15. That is 3:15 p.m. Geneva time, and it will run until 16:30 Geneva time. The title under which this side event will be running is as follows: The Situation in Myanmar, How Irresponsible Arms Flow. I repeat, the situation in Myanmar, how irresponsible arms flow fuel the crisis. So that is the topic or the title of the side event. It is organized by Control Arms as well as Amnesty International. So participants are invited to join this side event, as it is meant to complement the work of these meetings. Secondly, and as we always do, the speakers list for tomorrow will close at 1800 hours today. So delegates are requested then to enlist for speaking tomorrow. But we also encourage our delegates, those who deliver statements, if they are in a position to do so, to submit also their statements that they will be reading. So that helps us to facilitate our interpretation a lot. But at the same time, if you submit a statement, we would request an indication whether you would like to see your statement posted on the website. It's not mandatory, but if you submit a statement, please indicate if you would want it to be posted on the website. If you indicate that you would want it to be posted, it will be posted. But if you indicate otherwise, we would follow your preference as well. I am happy also to announce here that the video recordings of these meetings, starting on Monday and up to this point, are currently available. We have got video recordings on the website. If you go to the website per day, there are video recordings, so you can be able to watch this meeting at your own spare time. The other announcement I would like to make is about the translation of documents. I would like to confirm that all documentation which are part of discussions here are now available online in all 6 languages, or all the treaty languages that we have. So they are not only in English, but they are in all other languages. So if you would want to access them in a different language, they are available. And finally, we request, as we always do, that if you join the meeting tomorrow, please do so in good time, so that we prevent a congestion at about 12 o'clock or a few minutes before 12 o'clock. But also when you join the meeting, it's important that you indicate the state or the name of the organization that you are representing, because it makes it easy for us to be certain that you are indeed the person who registered to participate in this meeting. It's part of our security arrangements, so it's important that we uphold that. So without much ado, that was a list of my speakers. And I think today we are doing very well with time. It's still 2 minutes to 3 o'clock. So I wish to commend the facilitator of the first session and the co-chairs of the last session for keeping up to time. Thank you so much for your attention, and this meeting is adjourned. We will meet tomorrow at 12 o'clock Geneva time. Have a good afternoon.